All right, so if you're just tuning in, some breaking news. Desean Jackson's going to have surgery tomorrow, and it looks like he's going to be out for the rest of the year. 4 to 6 weeks was the initial time frame, but it sounds like he might not play again the rest of the year. All right, this one gets interesting now. John McMullen, Football at 4, the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Let's get right into it, John, as this news just comes out. What do we know? Number one, is this accurate? Can you confirm that Jackson will have the surgery tomorrow and that is likely to miss the rest of the regular season?
I don't know about the timetable. Timetable's supposed to still be around 4 to 6 weeks, but he is having surgery. He's having surgery with Dr. William Myers, who's from Philadelphia. And he's the go-to guy when it comes to core muscle injuries in the NFL. Basically, anybody who has a sports hernia or a core muscle injury, and the Eagles still are not clear on what this is fully, at least transparently. He's the guy to go to, and he's the guy I can also say who recommended surgery the first time, all the way back in week 2 after he was forced to leave the game in Atlanta. As a surgeon, you give people options. There were 2 options. Desean chose the other one, and it's pretty clear he did not choose wisely. Pretty clear he should have had the surgery originally, but it is what it is at this point.
All right, so is there some sort of miscommunication? I mean, did the Eagles have the thought, or did he re-injure it yesterday to the point where he thought he could have played how he felt at the start of the game yesterday and then re-injured it in that game yesterday? In other words, did the Eagles put too much trust that his health was going to make it through the rest of the season?
No, because I don't think it was an Eagles decision pushing him out there. This was, remember, Desean's original goal was to not miss 4 to 6 weeks. And the thought process was that he could get back in a quicker fashion through rest and rehab. But he knew and he understood if that was the way he wanted to go, he was going to have to play through some discomfort. So that was the decision. Which way do you want to go? And he wanted to get back on the field as quickly as possible. Turned out it lasted longer. And, through it all, through the rehab, remember, you have all these tests, and you're waiting for him to reach a particular baseline from where he was before. And once he reaches those baselines, then you're cleared by the doctors, and then you can go out there and play. John Clark reported that he tore his abdomen entirely off the bone. I don't know if that's the case. I can't confirm that part of it, the aggravation. But this is not an Eagles decision saying you got to get back on the field. This was a medical staff decision, trainers, everybody together, including Desean, who, remember, again, had pushed things off. The hope was Minneapolis, then it was Dallas, then it was Buffalo, and it kept getting pushed back. He reached those baselines, and obviously it didn't work out.
John, for the listeners out there because I get on Twitter now after this news breaks, and you're on as well. I already saw you tweet out a couple things regarding the whole situation, but it's just tweet after tweet after tweet. Eagles fans screaming at the Eagles medical staff. So can you please explain that situation?
I feel sorry for that. Yeah. I really do. Because I've said it consistently. I said the Eagles' problem is messaging. They're not above board with these types of things. I've talked about it constantly. This was the first time this day. Now, people listening to Football at 4 already knew this, if you're listening. Desean turned down surgery. But this is the first time the Eagles publicly admitted that. I don't know why. It's a player decision. You, again, as a surgeon, you give people options. It's just like if you guys needed surgery in real life, you usually get a second opinion. You get all the information. You make your own decision. It's the same thing here. The Eagles advocated surgery. The Eagles wanted him to have surgery. Dr. Myers recommended surgery. He wanted to go in a different direction. He wanted to get back on the football field quicker. You can try to convince somebody to go in another direction, but that's all you can do, and that's kind of what happened here.
Real quick, John. So Peterson this morning on the radio says he expects him to be good in a couple of weeks. Then at the press conference today, he said, we'll reevaluate, and then admitted we might have to do something at this wide receiver position. So how did it change from 8 o'clock this morning to 3:38 that he's getting surgery?
Well, from the Eagles' perspective, again, it was about, I think, and I can only speculate from this point, is that they understood, as I said, that he was going to have to play through discomfort. And their original thought was he didn't like that discomfort and didn't want to play through it. So, in fact, I wrote about it on 973ESPN.com. I think if you listen to that press conference, to me, it was a clear message to Desean that said,
"Yeah,
look, either get the surgery or you got to play through the discomfort." Turns out it was worse, and he worsened it.
There is a statement by the Eagles, by the way, that just came out. Real quick, Desean Jackson will undergo surgery this week on a core muscle injury. He originally suffered the injury against the Falcons September 15th. Following the game in Atlanta, Desean met with Eagles and multiple independent specialists to determine the best course of action. After gathering all the necessary information, the decision was made to proceed non-operatively through rehabilitation. Desean worked hard for 6 weeks to progress to a point where all parties were comfortable with him returning to practice and then to play in the game yesterday against the Bears. During the first quarter of the game against the Bears, Desean experienced discomfort and was held out for precautionary reasons. After further testing the decision this morning, it was determined that the best course of action for a full recovery is to proceed with surgery. So there you go. That's the Eagles' stance.
Yeah, and that lines up. Again, the only thing I can't confirm from my side of it is it worse than it was before yesterday's game? I have no reason to doubt John Clark's reporting, so I assume it is. But this is the same place they were in week 2, and they wanted him to get the surgery, and he chose a different avenue. And it didn't work out. That's pretty much where we are.
All right. So where we are is with the team that you saw yesterday. Not good enough at that position, as Doug kind of insinuated. You said it today. You know, whatever they calculated was a miscalculation. So 9 weeks in at a bye, this is when you would typically do something. Now, we know you can't make a trade. Do they go with what they have in-house, or do they have some rabbit to pull out of the hat on the street?
No, they have to bring in a body now. So that was the assumption. You would ask the question before the Eagles release came out there. What did Doug mean by that? If he knew? No, I think that had to do with the lack of production from Mac Holland and the inability for J.J. Arcega-Whiteside to get on the field, and even the lack of production of Nelson Aguilar, and Alshon Jeffrey probably having his best season. His worst season as a professional thrown in there as well. Everything has gone wrong with this receiving corps. Nobody has lived up to expectations with the exception of Desean Jackson in one game. Everybody has underachieved from what you thought you were going to get. So that, I think, is what Doug was speaking to. At some point, you got to bring in somebody who, even if they are the 6th or 7th option, if they're out there and they have to play, even though you'd rather get other guys the football sooner, they have to take advantage of nobody paying attention to them. I mean, you know, we see when you have certain guys you can't shoot and you're playing 4-on-5, essentially offensively. As they
Jimmy Butler taking shots at Ben Simmons now?
Yeah, come on, man.
That wasn't necessarily a shot at Ben Simmons. You've seen at least he can do something. You have guys who can't do anything offensively.
Yeah.
But the point is, I mean, Mac Hollins hasn't caught a football since September. We're in November. We're heading towards Thanksgiving. It's not like he's playing 5 snaps a game. He's out it now. At his apex, he was playing significant snaps, but ever since Dallas Goedert got healthy, he's been down in the 45-50% range. But name another receiver in the NFL that plays 45-50% of snaps and never catches. I mean, he's been awful. And the Eagles can talk about it and everything else. As organization, going back to Riley Cooper, this is the only organization in the history of the NFL that talks about blocking as something significant for receivers. Don't get me wrong, you'd love to have guys who are great blockers, but come on. The job description is in the title, wide receiver. You can't play that position in this league and not catch a football and over. So there needs to be an up. And I'm starting to think we're going to get round 3 of Jordan Matthews, which isn't going to excite me at all. It'll probably excite the fan base somewhat, but he's better than Mac Hollins. I will say that.
Yeah, but that puts you in the same spot you were in last year where Matthews is a slot guy, and now you're moving Aguilar back outside.
Well, I agree. It's not good. I prefer, and that's what I tweeted a little while ago, I prefer to throw JJ into the deep end of the pool and let him sink or swim because at least there's some upside there. And I would advocate that's the Eagles go.
Can you call Torrey Smith?
No.
All right.
Torrey couldn't play when he was here.
Well, you won the Super Bowl with Torrey.
Yeah, but he couldn't play.
Yeah, well, that's okay. You just need someone who can run fast.
People are saying, Mike Wallace is 33, but there's a reason he's not signed.
Yeah.
And he only played 2 games. He got hurt in week 2. I mean, you're going into week 10 of the NFL season. This will be the bye week for the Eagles. I mean, if guys are on the street, they're on the street for a reason, and that's because they're good.
Yeah, sometimes though, like these,
still better than what the Eagles have.
Can Crabtree play, or is it a guy that Arizona says, "Look, we're rebuilding. We don't need a veteran receiver here, so we don't need you." Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, is Crabtree a guy that can play?
I mean, that's the same thing with Matthews. You saw Matthews, he's a slot receiver, but you saw him make some big plays last year because he's competent. When nobody's paying attention to him, he can do something. And Mac Hollins can't do that. So every name, with the exception of Torrey Smith, maybe, who's a great guy but can't play, every name you just mentioned is probably better than Mac Hollins.
Yeah, the only names – I'm looking at some wide – by the way, Joe Horn is still on the free agent list, which is pretty funny. A couple names that I recognize, you got Kevin White, who was a first-round pick, but got hurt, couldn't play. Crabtree – Michael Floyd, who was a first-round pick, has bounced all over the place, hasn't been able to do anything really. You got
but you didn't bring up the big name.
Terrell, I'll get there. You got Pryor. You got Pryor. After Pryor, I'm kind of you talk about the deep end of the pool. Kelvin Benjamin, he's a deep threat. Hey, he can. Sammy Coates, who was the guy that just got released.
No, but everybody on that list has one thing in common. He can't run. And that's except maybe Kevin White, if he's healthy.
He's never healthy.
No, he's never healthy.
Dez Bryant. You'll hear the Dez Bryant stuff, right?
Athleticism. Who's that?
Dez Bryant. You'll hear his name, right?
Oh, no. Oh, God, no.
J.J. Nelson. He was a deep threat.
I constantly, with guys like Dez and even guys like Michael Crabtree, Rob Motti loves it when I throw out this word, so I'll throw it out again. And I say it all the time. For some reason, NFL fans think players are in a constant stasis, and Dez Bryant is still Dez Bryant. I've been talking to you guys from when he had his Jones fracture. What year was that? It's years and years and years we've been talking about this. He's not the same guy from an explosion standpoint. This is a top 5 receiver in the league. Do you really think he would be unemployed if he was even a modicum of what he once was? I don't understand the obsession with names. I always talk about the NFL, and my dog's barking in the background. It's apropos because it moves in dog years. You think a player is the same player. They're not. It happens really, really quickly. And again, these guys are unemployed. That means they can't play.
Well, there's a guy that's unemployed that can play, Antonio Brown.
Yes, he can play. But but can he play in the minds of the NFL? People forget he's in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to stay available to play with everything he does
Is he
outside
even
the
an
line.
option?
No, the Eagles would not be interested in bringing that personality into the building.
John, are we going down the wrong?
Did we lose John?
Yeah, did we lose him? We might have.
I hear you guys.
Okay,
there
good.
There you are.
John, are we going down the wrong rabbit hole? So I'm going to steal this from Jeff Mosher since he's not in studio today. He tweeted out a few minutes ago the Eagles should think hard about becoming a predominant two tight end offense, not just 50 to 60% of the time, and they need to get used to dink and dunking with a heavier lean on the run. Downside, ball control offenses need reliable pass catchers, and to emphasize ball security, Eagles have too
now
many
I'm a
drops.
little angry at you, Ryan, because I've been saying that for weeks. That's the goal.
Sure, but
that's
now that
this
it's
team,
that's
what this team has essentially said, and that's what they've said behind the scenes.
And former
this is what I
Steelers
talked
wide
about.
receiver has just been claimed, by the way. The Panthers have claimed Dante Moncrief.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions about Dante Moncrief today.
He's got some speed.
Yeah, it's desperation time and they need a body now. So they are going to pick up a body. It's just a matter of what body. It's not going to be significant. It's not going to be a good player. It's not. As I said, there's just no way. This is not talent gathering season. You just do the best you can at this point. But they do need a body. But Jeff is right. This is a two tight end team now. Their base offensive personnel has to be 12, has to be the two tight ends because that's their best players. It already is. It's gone up from 50 to 60% to more like 65. They've already gone in that direction. They won the game with that on that final drive. That was brilliant, and I wrote about that on 973ESPN.com. That was brilliant in-game play calling by Doug Peterson. Did not have a receiver at his disposal. Remember, Alshon got hurt after having maybe his worst game as professional, but he did get hurt when he finally did catch one. And the majority of that drive, you're talking about Nelson Aguilar, Mac Hollins, and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside as your receivers. And to Doug's credit, he figured out a way. And he figured out a way by getting the football to Miles Sanders and Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert on third down. Those are their best players. Those are their best options. So without Desean, they have to go about it a different way. That's the main thing. It's not 11 personnel. That's not a strength for the Eagles.
Well, how
any
much
longer.
then of yesterday's game when they struggled offensively is because the game plan had Jackson in mind?
Some. No. I mean, he was on a pitch count. He was scheduled, people tell me, to play about 20 plays. So it's not like he was a significant part of it as he typically would be. They were trying to let him get a feel for it, let him get his feet wet in the game, but he wasn't going to play significant snaps. So they knew that going in, and that was built into the game plan. But I think more of it had to do with Alshon playing so spectacularly bad and then getting injured. And then Nelson Aguilar, I don't know what happened to that guy. I mean, it wasn't good to begin with, but at this point, he's regressed, and I don't know how that's even possible.
John McMullen, football at 4. So Desean Jackson looks like he's done for the season. We'll see what the Eagles' next move is there.
Not necessarily, by the way. It's probably 4 to 6 weeks. And if they get into the playoffs, which I still think is a possibility because the NFC East is terrible, and if the Cowboys trip up here or there, and that's certainly not out of the question, that final 5 games it's going to be tough for the Eagles to get out of this because those final 5 games on that schedule, it's as easy as it gets when you're talking about the NFL.
Well, the Dolphins won yesterday.
Against the Jets.
That's true, but they're playing the Jets. And you already saw the Jets.
So they're at the bye week. They win yesterday. Does that win enter the bye week with positivity or more questions that still need to be answered?
Well, I mean, now there's tons of questions because of Desean. But from a standpoint, as I said, of moving forward, I think it's all positive because of the schedule. I mean, all you have to do is the math. You're at 5 wins. You have 2 difficult home games. Let's say you split them. You got to get 1. That gets you to 6. And if you get 4 of the final 5, you're in double figures. So, I mean, they should be in the conversation as we get late in the season, and then you roll the dice. And if it is 4 to 6 weeks, who knows? Maybe Deshaun is able to come back for the playoffs.
Real quick, did the Eagles' defense play well, or is Mitchell Trubisky that bad?
B.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, it's tough. It really is tough to gauge. And I said this was a soft spot on the schedule for 2 consecutive weeks. And it really is tough. I mean, you look at it and say, wow, that defense is playing really well. And statistically, they are. It looks great. But those 2 quarterbacks are bad. We've talked about it consistently. We're not lying to you. They're bad. That's as bad as it gets in this league. I joke that the scariest thing I saw this Halloween season was Mitchell Trubisky's footwork. It is abominable. It is not professional level. So, I mean, you should shut that kind of player down. Not only is he bad, but he's also having a crisis of confidence. So it's sort of like Nelson Aguilar, but at the quarterback position. He's not only not that good, he's also struggling with his confidence, and it makes him that much worse than he even typically is. So you have that on one hand. On the other hand, look, it's still pretty impressive. At one point, they were threatening to finish 30 minutes of football in negative yardage. And I don't care who you're playing against. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
They managed to get, I think, 9 yards by the end of halftime. They completed 1 pass, and then he had a little bit of a scramble. And that's all they gave up in the first half. Second half, they gave up the deep ball, but there was no consistency. It's hard to go through an NFL game against anybody and not give anything up. But if you're going to be on coming up, it's going to get more difficult.
Darius Hayward-Bay? Sorry, had to.
Anyone?
Well, as I said, it depends what scale you're looking at. You know, you need somebody better than Mac Hollins. I don't understand. I've criticized his coaching staff for a long time. I do not understand why J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is not playing. They gave him a little bit more work yesterday. I think after the bye week, they will throw him into the pool, so to speak. I think because that's how unproductive Mac has been. And then whoever you bring in, I think, as I said, Jordan Matthews is the most likely, only because he and Carson Wentz are really close friends. He knows the offense. He's proven that he can make some plays when nobody's paying attention to him. At this point. And so if your expectation is somebody better than Mac Hollins, you can do that. But if your expectation is a difference maker, you're not going to do that. You're not going to be able to acquire that player at this point.
More tonight, Bruno, Colin Thompson, John McMullen, and obviously this will be a big topic of conversation. Listen from 6 to 8, countdown to kickoff at the Landmark in Glassboro. Thanks, pal. Good to see you yesterday, man.
You too, man. It's always exciting to see Mike Gill.